All right, I want to talk about setting up Japanese chisels because I got this beautiful set of Masashige bench chisels and they all need to be set up. And when I say set up, there's things you have to do to Japanese chisels to get them performing correctly that you don't always have to do with sort of the Western style chisels. Think of it like a race car. Uh, you buy a car from a dealership, you adjust your seat, fill it with gas, you're ready to go. But if you get a race car, like a used race car, for club racing, you have to do stuff. You have to dial in the suspension, adjust the brakes, and all that type of stuff. Same thing with Japanese chisel. These chisels perform better than any chisel on earth. And in order to get that performance, you have to do several things, such as set the hoop, prepare your handle in a way that you like, flatten the back, sharpen the edge, and then some people put a slight mushrooming on the wood on the back. And that's sort of how I learned, and I kind of like it because it will happen naturally whether you do it intentionally or not, but if you do it intentionally, it's sort of a smoother aesthetic look. And some carpenters say that doesn't matter. It's kind of your preference. So I'll walk you through the steps for setting these chisels up, and hopefully you'll be able to get some more performance out of your Japanese chisels. Alright, first thing I'm going to do before anything is number the bottoms of the chisels. I'm not going to put the millimeters, I'm just going to number them 1 through 10. This is going to get pounded off, so it doesn't matter. And we'll see if the lacquer thinner actually just dissolves this mark. Alright, good. There's still 10 chisels here. We verified that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off of these rings and label the rings. If you're just setting up one chisel, obviously you don't need to worry about that. I'm doing this all at once so I can batch this process and get them upset faster. To get the rings off, you just support it in a vise. You don't need to clamp the vise down. You're using the teeth of the vise to hold the ring. And pound the chisel out of it. Avoid pounding your chisel right into the ground. Okay, so we got the ring 1 off. I'm going to label it on the outside 1. We can wash this off later. It's fine. One thing to notice is these rings only go on one way. There's like a tapered end, sort of like a gradual fillet in here, and then there's a harder end on this side. I'm going to basically number these so that when you read the number, the fillet end is on the bottom. It's not that hard to confuse them, but it's something to pay attention to. All the rings are off. All these chisels have a lacquer, some sort of coating on the handle, and as well on this ferrule, which has this nice blued look. So if you leave the lacquer on, it's going to protect this until you start banging these chisels around, and then there's going to be weird little nicks on the lacquer, and then those nicks are going to rust, and it's going to look like dog shit. So if you remove the lacquer, everything will sort of wear naturally. Also, I removed the lacquer on the handles because in my experience, less likely to get blisters holding just natural wood than something with a seal on it. You sweat when you're working, the sweat rubs on the seal and it gets gross, whereas the wood has a little absorbing effect. So what we're going to do with this beautiful set of chisels, we'll just put them in this little pot. Another reason not to sharpen them before you do all these steps. And then I'm going to get something else to put in here so that I don't waste a whole bunch of lacquer. All right, all the chisel handles are submerged in the lacquer. That's going to dissolve those coatings, and then we'll wipe them off. So it's been about 20 minutes, and you can see all the lacquer is off, and you can feel the wood grain on the chisel. Okay, all these chisels now have had the lacquer on the handles and the ferrule removed. The next step is going to be setting the hoop on the back of the chisel. So I have the chisel number 3 and the number 3 ring here. The reason we put the hoop on the back is because we're using a metal hammer. And if we had no hoop, this wood would eventually split and shatter apart. So it's really important that this hoop is tight and not too far down. A lot of times people will tell you to trim this, but this wood compresses substantially if you set the hoop right. And if you trim it too much, you will end up jamming this down so far that the whole end of the chisel kind of mushrooms over. So before we put the hoop on the chisel, we need to take a file. And if you can see in here, there's a pretty clear ridge. So we're gonna just knock that down so it's a smoother curve. So let's do that. I'm just gonna push in one direction and just knock down that ridge. And work my way around the hoop. On the bottom of the hoop, we want a smooth transition. And on the top, we just want to make sure there's no burrs here that will clip the fibers of the handle when we're hammering it. So I'm going to work this over a little bit more, but to show you the burr, this is really just a little bit. Okay, so the hoop has been filed, and I just want to mention again, you're removing the burr on the bottom of the hoop. You want to be careful not to change the internal diameter because then it will press down onto your chisel more than you want. So just remove any burr on the top and smooth this transition on the bottom. The next step is we're going to be setting the hoop. For this, you want a piece of hardwood. This is it might be keaki or oak or something. Ideally, you could do it into the end grain. I would set up the chisel before you sharpen them so that you don't ruin your new edge jamming it into a piece of wood. And also, it's helpful to have this hoop setter, which is going to apply an even force all around the ring. If you loosen this up by sanding it or paring it away, you could probably tap it on with a regular hammer. But this is like not expensive, maybe $5 to $20. If you don't use something like this, if you use a socket or something like that, it's going to mar up this edge. And if this edge gets all damaged, then the wood at the back of your chisel is going to split off. And if it splits off, the ring will start to work its way out. Put my chisel, cross grain. Use my hammer to set the hoop a little bit just to get it square. And then I will finish the job with the hoop setter. And you gotta hit this pretty hard to get it to set just right. So this is not set far enough. We want to get maybe 2 mil of wood sticking out the top. Okay, that is a good amount of wood sticking out the top of the hoop. We've compressed we've compressed the end. The next step where we wet this and mushroom it over, that's sufficient wood to form a nice dome. That'll give you a nice surface to hit on. Also, we've made sure that there's not enough obstructions that this will start to impact the ferrule. And our blade is still nice and intact because it was hammering into this wood. It did not damage it. So now I'll repeat the process for the rest of the chisels. All right, all the chisels are back in a bucket. Not lacquer thinner this time, but just enough water to cover the bottoms. They've been in there for about 30 minutes. And that is so that the end grain of the wood soaks up water and gets soft. And now that the wood's soft, we're going to hit it with a hammer in an effort to mushroom over the top. And one that I already did. It's not the best, but it's serviceable. I mean, it's a chisel after all. You're going to be hitting this quite a bit. You see the wood has sort of covered over the ring here. And this is to keep this ring from working its way off. And then you end up smashing into the ring and it becomes, you know, it'll cut you. This will fall off. It'll just turn into a mess. So I'll show you how to mushroom over this head. So I'm going to use the round side of my hammer. These Japanese hammer have a flat side and a round side. And another great hammer for this job could be a ball peen, because what you want to start by hitting the center. You don't want to hit on the sides here, because that's actually it's gonna immediately sort of snap the fibers. You kind of want to expand it out from the middle. So if you tap in the middle with a ball peen or the corner of the round side of the hammer, it'll start to compress these fibers and sort of make like a internal pressure and break the connections between the fibers. And then once you've done that, you can do glancing blows where you drag the hammer off like that to build out a mushroomed head. Now you can see kind of here, the fibers are spread out in this direction. And this will kind of round over as you work it. So that is getting the head mushroomed. And now the end of the chisel set up and we can move on to sharpening. Hi, if you liked this video, please let me know by clicking that thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel by clicking the red subscribe button. Please check the notes below the video for more ways to keep this channel going. Your support is greatly appreciated. And always, never stop building.